am so excited that you're here. I know that we've been sharing about what you can share on this episode, and I'm so excited. People have no idea. If you are new here, this episode is going to blow your mind, and you definitely need to listen all the way to the end. So, welcome, Jamie. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Thank you. Yeah, my name is Jamie Dazinski, and I am in Juliana's mastermind right now, the God Vibes Mastermind. And I am a semi-nomadic human who's currently living in the Midwest. Um, and I am doing a lot of transitions in my life and working on a lot of like piecing my story together. So this is going to be awesome because it's going to be good for me too.
You're like, it's like almost free coaching somehow. I don't know. It's going to be great. So tell us, I'm curious. I know
Yeah.
that it's interesting to hear how people relate with God or like what their story is. Because it's all different. Like some of us like know God, some of us don't. Some are curious if we can have a relationship. We just come from all different backgrounds. So I would just love to hear how you were introduced to God, maybe how that's evolved and like what he's doing in your life now.
Grew up Lutheran and went to church every Sunday, did the Wednesday kids classes. Everyone around me was also either Catholic or Lutheran, so I was very much immersed in that world. And I remember when I was really little, I felt like, wow, I have such strong faith. This is me like going back in time, but I remember feeling really connected to God and feeling like um just really alive in the spirit. And then I can't pinpoint exactly when it happened, but at some point church became boring and I did the stereotypical thing that a lot of people do, and I was like, do I have to go do this anymore? I don't want to, but it's like what our family did, so we did, right?
Yeah.
um and so as I got older, I kind of transitioned away from church and um started living in my own means and my own good, my own whatever I wanted that to be. Um, and I feel like I just kind of got stuck in trying to be this person I wasn't, but I didn't know how to be who I was.
Mm,
Um, and what that looked like for me was very much so um, just chameleon in and out of friend groups, being whoever people wanted me to be. So there's a lot of people pleasing for my parents, a lot of people
yeah.
pleasing for my friend groups, doing things just to feel acceptance and validation from other people. And that obviously didn't really work very well because I always felt like, who am I? Who is this person that I'm becoming? None of this feels real. Um,
Okay.
so when I had an experience in college where I was just living the crazy party girl lifestyle for a long time, and that was one identity and hat that I put on. I was like, I can be as wild as I want. It doesn't matter. Um, and I remember I had a conversation with my dad, and I was like, Dad, none of this is real. Like, it's not real. These people aren't my friends. None of this feels like it matters. Like, who cares if I get a degree? Who cares who these people are? It was like this very empty feeling, but I was having a lot of fun at the same time. It's very weird. um and and so that was kind of the turning point for me in the party world and being like, okay, I'm gonna step out of this and try something different. And I um I moved on from there and um but still looking for that validation and acceptance though. I was still looking for those pieces from other people,
Yeah.
and what that could look like and how I could be filled up in the world. Um and so then that kind of turned into um being smart, and I went and transferred schools. My undergrad journey is very fun, is 4 different schools in 6.5 different years, and
Oh my
then
gosh.
I got my master's degree in 1 year. So
This is wild.
Yeah. So I transitioned from being a wild party girl with a low GPA to being
A
a
super nerd.
4.0 master's degree student.
Insane.
Yeah. So there's just some application in there, right?
Yeah.
Um, and then once I got my master's degree all figured out and all completed, then I transitioned into the working world, of course. And I started working for a wilderness therapy program. And so then my identity kind of came all through my work. It was like, who am I in this space? And it was being a helper to teenage kids, which is really valuable work, but still not putting God in my life in the way that I wanted him to be at this point.
Yeah.
So it's kind of when I started to kind of think around how do I continue to learn and grow, but like actually be who I am.
Yeah.
And I had a conversation with my sister, and she was like, what does it feel like to just fit in everywhere?
Ooh.
And that hit me in a way where I was like, I can do that. But
Yeah.
part of that is because I'm not being true to who I really am sometimes.
Mm.
Um, so that was kind of a start of a journey for me of figuring out who am I really? What does that really mean? And yeah, so since then I've done a lot of other things. I'm a serial learner, serial
There's a
grower,
there's a theme happening here.
serial transitioner.
Oh my gosh.
Um, but I think so 2 years ago I started kind of in more of the coaching world of things and started doing some of my own coaching, started getting a certification for coaching and doing a lot of the work that comes along with that, mental, emotional, spiritual work. Very, very engrossed in the personal development world.
Yeah.
And there were still pieces missing in that too. It was like, okay, I'm growing in these ways. But like, I also have this relationship with God over here that's like not really being fostered. It's a back burner project. It's something where like I want it, but I only want it for 5 days at a time. And then I can't keep the habit. I can't keep doing the thing.
Mm.
And it wasn't really alive for me.
Yeah.
And then maybe this last year or so, it's become really alive for me. So I made a new friend who's a Christian, and we've been doing Bible studies together, which has been really great.
So fun.
Um, I somehow found your program and now have a new community of ladies that are also amazing. Um, and the word feels alive to me. Like when I read my Bible now, when I'm praying, there's more like this is real. This is like genuine, and my identity is coming through this. So another piece of that too is when I was feeling really, really, really unworthy, I had quit my job in wilderness therapy. So there was another transition. I was like, identity, where am I? Um, and I was just feeling this like pressure to, I don't know what I was feeling, but I was feeling a lot of unworthiness, and I was sitting in my a tiny house, which is another story. um
Like one of those actual tiny houses?
it's a shed that we converted into my house because I quit my job in order to go live where my fiance lives so that we could be out of a long distance relationship, but I
Wow.
could still have my own space. So I
Amazing.
got to live in the woods.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Creative
Um
points right there for sure.
yeah, so it was like my little sanctuary. I could wake up and the birds would be chirping and the sun would shine through the
Aw.
windows, and it was very connecting time for me. But I was standing out there one morning and I was thinking about worth. I was in my coaching program at that point, and we were doing some worth work and things. And I just heard God say to me, like, you are worthy. And
Mm.
then the verse that kept popping up was Ephesians 2:10, like, and the paraphrase version that's in my head is like, you are God's masterpiece.
Mm,
And that kept coming up over and over and over again for me. And
yeah.
that really sunk into my soul.
Wow. And it was
Yeah,
just like
it
a
was
normal
really,
day, right? Like you just like stepped outside like any other day and all of a sudden you just got hit with that in your spirit.
yeah,
Wow. That's
yeah,
powerful.
it was amazing.
Very, very.
Um, yeah, so since then, I've been trusting that that's true and that I am worthy, that I have a lot of value in my skills. And with all of these different experiences I have, I can meld them together for something that God really wants me to do.
Amazing. And I know you've highlighted a couple of words and I'm curious how God has been unpacking even the fact that you're his masterpiece, but he gave you these words, validation, acceptance, identity. So what has he been doing with those? Because it does sound like from this wild narrative that you have, which you're like killing it in all things, right? Like, so it's not like you just like started something and didn't finish. It's like you fully were invested in whatever you were doing. And then you're like, nah, we're good. We're moving on to this now. Right. So it's like, what did
Yep.
he teach you about those words so far, right? Maybe in this past year, however he's really been relating with you.
Yeah. Yeah. In this past year, I think validation and acceptance has really come from my relationship with him, instead of looking to my partner or my family or my friends. Like, that stuff is still there too. Of course I want some validation from the people in my
Yeah.
life,
Like, tell
but
me
when
I'm
I'm
worthy.
looking, yeah, like,
Tell me I'm special. Love me. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, for sure. um but when I'm looking to Jesus for my validation, what I'm getting out of that is that I don't need it from other people then. So if
Mm,
I'm actually looking up above and I'm seeing that and I'm like, God, be my validation today, then what is happening for me is that I'm filled with joy and I don't need the outside opinions of other people to be my guiding force like they maybe were as I was a teenager
yeah.
or in my early 20s.
Yeah.
And I'm still stepping into that and trusting that on a
Yeah.
daily basis and remembering that, like, oh yeah, I should look up there. I want to look up there. I want the relationship to be here in my heart. So it's a daily process.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it's important. And
And then
then
what does acceptance and what does identity mean or how have those words changed? Because it's so interesting. Like I have found like now I'm like a word nerd, right? Like I'm like there a word, an example of this, right? Like I used to hate the word, literally hate the word
mm,
responsibility because when you grow up and you take on so much responsibility that you didn't know better, like you didn't realize that it wasn't yours, like nobody told you and they weren't owning their responsibility. So when you take it on, you're like, I hate it because it's like so much and so heavy. So then later
yeah,
he like changed that for me and it was just my ability to respond to life. And I'm like, hold up, what? Like now it's just, you know what I mean? Like I can just like learn how to respond well to life. And that's actually attractive versus something where I don't want any responsibility. Right. So I'm just
yeah,
curious if he's
absolutely.
done something like that with you, where it's like he's totally changed what those words mean, acceptance and identity.
Yeah, I don't know that I have a total change in definition like your example, um, but I think the, like, source of where those things are coming from is what's different for me. Like, they're not coming from the outside world, they're coming from my internal experience with God, and
Powerful.
that feels way different.
So powerful. I was
Um
even thinking about the word significance, right? Like there's human needs, and one of the human needs, right, is to feel significant. But it's interesting because when we don't feel that or we don't believe we are, we look for it everywhere. And so that's kind of where that
Absolutely.
like adventure happens, where it's like, I'm going to go here. And then like, if that's over, then I'm going to go here. And it's like, why can't I be significant? And the whole time it's like, God said you are significant. Like he's like trying to like get it into you. But it's like when you do actually get that in your spirit that you are significant, then you show up and you walk like it because you're owning that. Like you embody being significant, and now you're not desperate for it or searching for it in all the wrong places. And I feel like that's so, so powerful. It's like when you start recognizing more and more of who you are, you're not trying to morph or using your words, be a chameleon in all these different environments. You just be who you are.
Mhm.
And like the freedom in that is insane, right? Like, and how much energy that frees up is wild to me.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
So
powerful.
for me, I think like identity and worth are very tied together.
Yeah.
In the course of my life, it's always been like who I am determines how worthy I am in this situation. So I'm really thankful that that has changed.
So good. So good.
Um,
Yeah.
and
Give it an
I think
example
that
of like how that's been different when you show up in a situation. Cause it's subtle. So I'm just curious, like how, because
yeah,
it sounds like you can really tell the difference. So I'm curious what that looks like.
yeah, it's really subtle. So what's a good example? Um, we'll do something with my partner, right? So we've been
Okay.
together for 12 years on and off. So he's seen a lot of the different changes in Jamie, um, and a lot of the different identity hats that I've worn.
Yeah.
Um, but um, yeah, so say your question again, please.
Yeah. So like how you, because you're defining worth and how that's like really changed for you. So like how you know that you're not really seeking that outside of you, right? Like how you like own it first and then you can just be worthy in every situation. Like, so how does that play out in a situation? Because it sounds, to some degree, it sounds like cerebral, right? Like it sounds like a really good concept, but then you're like, how does that actually work though? Do you know what I mean? Like, how would I apply that? You see what I'm saying?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Um, so I think that the way that that applies to my life is where in the past, I would have looked to my partner for some of those worth things too. I would have been like, hey, look at me, look at how nice I look. Like, look at, like, tell me I did a good job making this meal, and then I will feel good enough for you.
Mm,
Um, where now I'm like, I made this meal, it's great food. I know that it's good because my worth is not coming from this food.
I love it. So there's also like a level of just being unapologetic and confident is kind of what I'm hearing too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Love that.
Yeah, because the identity is coming from the things that God says that I am, and I'm trying to embody those more versus the things the world is telling me that I am, or the different hats that I've tried on to be pleasing to other people.
Oh man, that was so powerful. Okay, I'm gonna try to put new words to this and you can like break it down to make sure I get it. But I'm like, we need to hear that and sit in that again. The difference is, okay, so when you're like building a relationship with God and what you were saying in the beginning, where his word starts becoming active to you, you start actually receiving what you're reading. It's like you're reading God's thoughts. When you're reading the word of God, you're reading God's thoughts. And so those start to get stored up in your heart and you start to believe that that's who you are the more and more you read it. Like, so take your verse, right? Ephesians. I am God's masterpiece. Like, whoa, like, let me unpack that and like actually break down what that means, or like, God, show me what that means, show me what it means to be your masterpiece. And like you start walking that out with him and you're not like super conscious of what's happening, right? But gradually you are embodying this more and more every day. So you're kind of like walking taller. So you're like, what up? Like, I'm God's masterpiece. You know what I mean? Like there's a different pep in your step versus like, I don't know who I am. I don't know why I'm here. I don't, right? Like it's different. So what you said just now, which is so powerful, is that I am embodying who I am versus spending all of your time and energy trying to figure out who people need you to be and trying to be that. What?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Insane. Like, cause just hear all the, like, they're both going to take work. They're going to both take energy, but one makes you really like confident and secure and stable, right? You become rooted and grounded in him. The other one makes you insecure, double-minded, messy, like all over the place, right? And it turns you out, it spirals you out into all that crazy making, right? Which I say is self-sabotage, and we all have our own unique cocktail of that. So it's like
Yep.
people pleasing, codependency, no boundaries, right? Just like enabling behaviors, all of this stuff. They were like, I'm just being loving. And it's like, pause, are you though?
Yeah.
Is that loving or no? Because it doesn't even seem like you're loving yourself, right? So I love what you said. You can embody who you are and you start to know who that is as you spend time with God. Or you can keep trying all the things out in the world and trying to be the chameleon, meaning be who everybody needs you to be in every single situation. Hearing
Hmm.
that from the outside, I'm like, one sounds exhausting. And the other one
Yes.
kind of sounds inspiring to me. You know what I mean? I'm like, ugh. But we all do it
Yeah,
when we don't know better, you know?
for sure. And even sometimes when we do know better,
Yeah. You're like, this just feels like what I know, so I'm gonna do this thing.
There is no perfect, right?
True. True. And I love that. That's a great point too. It's like even giving up perfection for excellence,
Hmm.
right? Because God never required perfection. He just said, be excellent. And if you're
Hmm.
made in his image and likeness, you can do that. It's just a natural flow of what flows out of you, right? So
Yeah,
powerful.
absolutely.
I love that.
So good.
You put, I know, I'm like, we just had
That
church,
kind
I
of
think. I don't know, but
where two
that
or
was
more are
powerful.
gathered, right?
Yeah. We're like, revelation is happening. Pause for it. So I love, so tell me too. So you mentioned that you're in the God's Vibes Mastermind. I'm just curious how God has led you here and what that journey has been and what he's been unpacking since you've dropped in there. Because
Yeah,
you get
good
to be
stuff.
in it for an entire year. So although the mastermind is like 3 months as far as how the content is released to you, and that's on purpose. So you don't get overwhelmed, but you get to hang in there for a whole year. So tell me what that's been like from like how he led you there. Now that you're in it, you're like, what is happening? And just where you are now.
Absolutely. Yeah, so I have no idea how he led me there. I got an email.
So good.
I was actually gonna go back to my email last night, but I didn't do this and see like how long I had been on your email list
I
before the
love,
God's Vibes Mastermind showed up in there.
yeah.
Because that's really the first one I paid attention to from you, but I have no idea how long I've
Oh
been on
my
your email
God.
list
I
or
love how
not.
he works.
Because before I joined, I was not following you on Instagram. I had no connection to your podcast. I had no connection to anything that you had put out into the world.
Look at
Um,
God. I love that.
but I read the email, and then I think I got another one the next day, and I was like, "Ooh, I got 2 days to decide if I'm gonna do this."
Oh my
And and like a really big part of me was like, yeah, I want to do this, of course, more learning, more growth, heck yeah, and also connecting God to all the things I have going on, that sounds great.
God.
And then I was kind of like, okay, but money, hmm.
Yeah.
But I figured that part out. um
Where God guides, he
yes,
provides. That's just always how it works. It's like just trust him with the provision. He'll make it happen.
yes. So yeah, I think I signed up the evening before it started, like the Sunday before the Monday that it started.
Amazing. You're like, I'm
Because I
just
think I got
skirting
the
in
email
the
on like
final
Friday.
moment.
Yeah. I think I got the email on Friday. I read it, and then I read it again on Saturday, and then I read it twice on Sunday, and then I was like, okay, do this.
Oh my God.
So yeah, that's what was led here.
That's amazing. God just like, you need
And
to see this and we're gonna get you in there.
yeah. So really thankful. The pre-work content, amazing. I was worried I wasn't gonna have enough time to do it because I was like, oh, this starts tomorrow and there's a whole week of content before it. Like, what am I gonna do? But thankfully I'm a binger, so I just listened to all of them and I was like, whoa, this is so good.
It's like, God, you get me.
Yes.
You do
Yeah.
exactly what I needed.
Mm-hmm. And what I think of that I love most about your program so far is that the videos have a little bit of like you teaching a little bit of personal development, but a lot of God. And it
Yeah.
combines all of them together so well in a way that I haven't seen before, but a way that I really need coming from that world,
Yeah.
that I really relate to. So thank you.
That's so powerful. Oh my gosh. Okay. So it has to you, because I think you were mentioning story too, like how important it is to get to know somebody or like hear how that's impacting them. So can you speak to that? Because I think you've shared
Yes.
offline with me
Oh
about
yeah,
that. And
yeah.
I'm like, oh, that's so funny. Because it's like sometimes when you're just trusting God and putting content in the world, you don't even like necessarily remember the full details of what are happening. You just like trust him and do it, you know? So I'm curious. Tell
Yeah.
me about the story element too.
Yeah, so interweaved through everything, and now as I'm in week 5.5 or something, there's
Yeah.
even more of your story coming out, and I really relate to those pieces of your story, like the different things you tried before you really found God, the your steps to being where you're at right now in your business. And just how you share that and relate it to the content that you're teaching for that day is really um relatable, to a lot
Yeah.
of different people. And that's the same for all the content too. Like you're going to get the pieces out of it that you really need. And I think it's going to be really cool to, so my goal, but who knows if this will actually happen, is to go through it quarterly for the next year. So we're doing
I
this with the
love
live coaching, and then I'd really like to do it each quarter and just like keep going through all the videos and all the content in whatever way I can.
I
So that I
love
can
that.
really get the most out of it.
I
So
love
that's ideal plan. Reality Jamie, like maybe a little less than that, but
Oh
I'm
my
shooting for
God.
it.
Well, I love that you say that because that's actually how it's designed, right? So since it is 3 months, it's like, okay, you go all the way through to be like, okay, wow, like this is like for most, maybe like for every, it's content that you maybe have heard before, but you've never had it presented this way. And it's like it allows different revelation to actually get into your spirit. Like there's definitely an anointing on however that's happening, right? It's wild. So
Mhm.
everyone can listen to the same video and like do the homework and get all of the different revelations, and like it's powerful, right? So it's like you go through and it's almost like you get exposed to it. Then you go through again and you're like, oh, like I'm totally getting something entirely different than that first go round, or I like totally missed that. And so you can see like you keep growing spiritually, or it's almost like you keep maturing and getting stronger and stronger in new content. So I love that
Mhm.
as your strategy because that is the intention. Like you figured me out.
Excellent.
I
Let's
love
create
that.
a 3-month program so that we can do it 4 times.
Yes. I mean, because that's the whole point. Like I've just, when you experience a program, you get exposed to it. Usually that's not enough. And a lot of
Mhm.
times there's a ton of content in there, and that can actually just in and of itself be overwhelming. You're like, oh my
Absolutely.
God, there's like 8 modules. There's not that many in there, but like there's like four. But like it can feel really overwhelming because you're like, you just see all of this content, right? And then you don't know
Mhm.
how that applies. And to your point, the main key is that you get exposed to it so that you embody it, right? Because if you just
Mhm.
experience knowledge and you don't embody it, you might as well not have even gotten exposed to it,
Yeah,
right?
for
That's
sure.
why
That's a really good point.
I mean, that's why the mastermind element is so important. And then we get to meet live every single week so we can like work out like whatever you're experiencing and be like, can you break that down? Or like, tell me more about that. Or this thing is happening. What do you think? Super powerful because you actually need a safe container or space to talk about this because who else is talking about it?
Right.
Right? There's
Yeah.
like usually nobody in your world that is like diving deep on this level. And like, this is a safe space to do it. So I love that. Such good feedback.
Mhm. Yeah, the community aspect of it is really fun. Like the group of ladies that we've got going, they're a hoot.
They're a hoot. Oh my God. And I love too. So tell me too about some of the testimonies or some of the ahas or some of the things that God has been working in you. So you mentioned the pre-work, which is super fun. It's literally
Yeah.
just a week of content that you get to experience before actually diving into the mastermind to get familiar with some terms that we use, like building spirit-driven success. A lot of times people are like, what does that mean? But it's essentially putting God at the center of every area of your life and gauging how surrendered you are, right?
Yes.
10 being
Hmm.
like, I'm fully surrendered, 0 being like, I haven't even talked to God about it yet. Like,
Yep.
new success measurement. So that's just an example. So when you start thinking about that, you're like, oh, I can see where I have opportunity to grow in my relationship with God. So, what testimonies? I know that you had said something about good or God, but what other like ahas has he really been like highlighting to you as you've been moving through week after week?
Yeah. So one of the videos you have is titled Good or God.
Yeah.
And the basis of that really struck me hard was like, I have created a really good life, a really like a life that I can do a lot of different things, go visit a lot of people. But a lot of that has been in my own power. Like all the transitions in my life have been like me making a decision really without God. Like I might have prayed about it, but I wasn't like actively searching for his direction in my life for those steps.
Yeah.
Um and so when the title was Good or God, I was like, oh, that is me. Like I have a lot of good things, but are they really from God? Are there better things out
You're
there?
like, I feel
Because I
conviction and
don't
I haven't
know.
even watched the video yet. This is scary.
Yeah. Yeah. So I loved that one. And it just really reminded me to have that surrender and to kind of start to remember what that means. And I actually wrote a note about surrender too.
Oh, I love.
Um, so what I'm learning from that is to give it all to God and let him sort out the mess so I can receive what he really wants for my life. And I don't think that I'm in full surrender yet, but I'm definitely heading that way. And working through the content in God's Vibes Mastermind is really helping me do that.
Oh my God. Okay. So let me like re-say this because I think that's really powerful. So you're basically redefining the word surrender, right?
Mhm.
Because it's like before, it's like I'm in control, I'm leaning on my own understanding, I'm ordering my own steps versus trusting that you have a good plan for me, that you've established my steps, and that you just want me to track with you, like two very different operating systems. So, what I'm hearing you say is that surrender is I'm going to give it over to him first and then allow him to give me wisdom, guidance, discernment, whatever it is, and then follow through when I get that. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Because
And
I think
be like
it's so
learning.
weird. It's like a scary word, like, and it's usually not a word that has a good association connected to it. You're like, I don't want to surrender. That means I'm giving up my power. Like whatever we
Right.
think it means, we think it means something like really
Yeah,
dramatic.
the connotation is
Right.
like
Like
meh.
submissive is another one where we're like, you know what I
Mhm.
mean? Like this is not a good
I
thing.
cannot submit.
Right. What do you mean? I'm an independent, self-sufficient. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah,
Track it.
definitely. That word has also been redefined for me a little bit, but um yeah, I the other thing that goes around along with surrendering for me is like actually listening and like being prayerful, having some habits around that and like learning how to listen because I think that has always been something that's been missing in those steps for me too. Like when you grow up Lutheran, you don't really learn how to listen, at least not to God.
Yeah. Learn how to follow some rules maybe, but
Yeah. So the funny thing is that my partner and I have been going back to church at a Lutheran church
okay.
because they have Saturday night services and that works well for us. And now that we've been going back to a Lutheran church, I'm like, oh, like those are actually Bible verses that I learned to memorize and why we said these different things. And like
Yeah.
I'm starting to kind of get it. And that's really interesting to
Oh,
me.
how fun. That is so cool. He's giving you like he's like redeeming your experience is what I'm hearing in that.
Hmm.
That's super neat.
Yeah. Before I was like, "Oh, this is boring. We just recite a bunch of things." And I'm like, "Well, actually that came from this story and this verse is Paul saying this to and we repeat that because of this." And like, "Oh, it makes so much more
Yes.
sense."
What? So fun. Like puzzle pieces.
Yeah.
I love. So what's been working? So since you're saying like another thing he's changing is how you listen, what's been working for you to do that? Because I know for me, and I've talked about this before in my story, where it's like I did a whole yoga teacher training before having a relationship with God, which slowed me down for 2 years so that I could actually, when I get to him, be still enough to read the word. So it's like you ain't ready yet. So we're gonna take you through this whole training where you learn how to slow down and just sit on your butt
Yeah.
so that you can do that when you get to like the time to study the word, right? So I would have no excuses at that point. So being still was like something that I'm like, nobody has time for that. Like nothing's going to come for that. I don't even know what that means. So
Hmm.
it sounds like for you that was listening. So I'm curious what's worked for you because that can be such a challenging thing to give into.
Yeah. I'm still very much so on the beginning part of
Okay.
that journey.
You
I
get
know that
me.
that's the missing piece for me.
Yeah.
And what I have done inconsistently is what actually helps is you had us do a challenge of reading the Proverbs 1 through 31, one per day. And I
Yeah.
did that for 31 days. I woke up in the morning, I read a
Let's
proverb, I
go.
did like 20 minutes of prayer, and it was great. Maybe a little less than 20 minutes, but that was my
Yeah.
ideal, what I was shooting for.
Oh,
Um, and then I transitioned to a different place and I lost all my habits.
like that was good for a month.
Yep. Um, but doing Bible studies has been really helpful for me because then I feel like the word's coming alive. I like the cultural context that comes along with that. Um, And what's really cool is all the studies that I'm doing right now connect with a lot of the different pieces that you have been saying in your videos. So I'm like,
Yeah.
ooh, I'm getting it from there. I'm getting it from there. I'm getting it from
Oh
there. Yeah.
my God. That's like this is the part that like you can't, it's God, right? Like you can't even facilitate that if you wanted to. And that's like the beautiful thing about the content, because he's going to expose you to exactly what you need to hear in a
Mm-hmm.
way that you can hear it and make it all make sense to you through your unique story. It's mind-boggling to me. Only God.
Yeah.
Amazing. I love that. Okay, so I'm hearing surrender change for
It's
you.
so cool.
It is so cool. It is so cool. So I'm hearing
So
surrender
I
change.
think that's how I'm currently learning to hear, is like hearing from lots of different places.
I love that. Yeah, like he's connecting old places. He's like present with you where you are, and then he's connecting like new places at the same time. Like he's making it all make sense, and you're not trying to make that happen. Do you know what I mean? Like it's just organically happening. And it sounds like it's
Yeah.
kind of exciting too, because it's like you're curious or open in a way that you've never been and allowing him to lead.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
powerful.
That's definitely been a space that I have not been open to or welcome to in the past. It's like, this is my life. I'm gonna do whatever I want.
Yeah.
So it feels, I am more energetic and joyful being in this space. And the other lesson that I'm really getting is just solidifying the like what goes in comes out. So I love being a part of your program because what I get is a lot of content coming back to me that is Christian based, and then listening to worship music, doing lots of things like that. Like, of course, I have smatterings of other things as well. But when
Yeah.
I'm more focused on that, what I feel is really joyful, what I feel is really alive. And I like the person that I am in that space. Um,
Oh, that's so good.
and I feel like I'm speaking life in that place. Like that's something that I'm working on too, is like, how am I communicating with people? Am I speaking life or am I speaking death? Like those two concepts. I know we've talked about this before too, is like the life
Yeah.
and death, but like being living but not alive.
Yes. Yeah, break that
Um,
down for people that haven't heard that
yeah.
broken down before. Break that down.
Sure. So we're all living on this earth, but to be truly alive is different, a different experience than just living. Like you can go through the day to day. I go to work, I eat lunch, I come home, I'm exhausted, whatever. Or you can choose to live in a different way where you're feeling alive and aligned with what God has for you, where you're still waking up, going to work, but you come home and you feel joyful. You get to hang out with your family. You feel thankful that that you have the blessings that you have, no matter how big or small those things are.
Yeah.
And then there's generosity that flows from that as well, which is just a much better way to live, in my opinion.
Come on. I love it. So I love this just thought that, being a king's kid, that's kind of the story. It's right. Like there's the king of kings and we're like the king's kids, right? And so it's like it's about a relationship. The story of God is about like a father and the relationship he has with his kids. Do you know what I mean? So it's like he talks about this kingdom, and the kingdom is righteousness, peace, and joy in the Holy Spirit. So it's like joy is a third of the kingdom. And when you think about that, you're like, it's important to God that I live in joy every day. It's important to God that I'm at peace and that I'm trusting him. It's important to God that I know who I am so that I'm not like living in an identity crisis, right? And able to influence the world rather than be infected by it, right? So, like, to your point, it's like the more of the kingdom that I'm like becoming aware of or waking up to or getting inside of me, because faith comes by hearing and hearing specifically the word of God, the more I'm feeling that into my being, right? I'm thinking about
Mhm.
it, I'm meditating on it, I'm storing it up in my heart. My spirit is like resonating with the Holy Spirit, like we're coming into agreement. The more that just flows without me trying. Like I'm not hearing from you that there's like a whole lot of efforting. There's like a whole lot of just like organic flow happening. It's like grace in action. It's like this very easy way to be. Whereas before it sounded like, when even at the beginning, when you were describing doing all of these brilliant things in the world, there was like a restlessness behind it though. Or
Oh
like
yeah,
a
that's a
deep,
great
like,
word.
yeah, like this, like I'm like desperate to find something and I have no clue what that is. And I'm also exhausted, right? But I have to keep
Yeah.
going. And this is like, I have so much meaning and I feel good and I feel free and like all these things are connecting and it's like I'm not even making that happen. It's just happening
Yes.
everywhere. So it's really different ways, to your point, to be in the world. Like I can just go through the motions and get through things and really be depressed in a lot of ways and
Mhm.
insecure and like overwhelmed and stressed out, right? Or I can align with this and allow it to rewire me or reprogram me so I can access everything I'm here to access and be
Mhm.
everything I'm here to be. And you're just like, oh, like that is way more attractive. And
Yeah.
a much like it feels alive. Like you actually can wake up and be excited to go about your day versus like, oh no, like what do I have to get done or what do I have to do? Like they're very different ways to
Oh
experience.
yeah. One's living out of anxiety and restlessness, and the other one is living out of like peace and freedom.
Come on.
Because when I so for a long time I used to wake up and it would just be the to-do list of what I had to do. Like the first 20 minutes of my day would be like, I don't want to get out of bed. Here's the 18 things I have to do. So I'm gonna get out of bed, but I don't really want to.
Yes.
And um and now I don't do that. Like in the morning. So let's see, maybe I don't know, maybe about a year ago, I started listening to more Christian worship music again.
Yeah.
And then, well, maybe this was even before that.
Okay.
But it was probably intermingled in the same times. But actually, what I had is like I'd wake up in the morning and have VeggieTales songs stuck in my head from my childhood.
Stop. Oh my God. Oh my
And those were the first thoughts I had in my head. And so I was like, cool, now I can just thank God that I have another day to live. And that is like the process that happened for me very organically of like, it's a song for me. And that's my reminder that like God is good. He's in my life. He loves me. And I can show up in any sort of way and Jesus will always be there.
God. It's so good.
Um,
It's so good.
so yeah, the music is a big cue for me of being connected. And then I went from there to now I have more worship songs that pop up into my head the first thing in the morning because that's just what my brain does. But I love it. So
I
instead of
know.
having the to-do list, I have the song.
That is amazing. And I think that there's so many different expressions of worship too. Like I personally believe like your life is your worship too, like how you live it as an expression back to God. Or there's the scripture that says do everything as unto the Lord. So like I love that as being worship, but I'm obsessed with music too, right? So it's like it's funny what worship sessions look like. There's those some where you don't even have lyrics and you're just like overwhelmed with peace. There's some where like you're like running around the room and like jumping everywhere. Do you know what I mean? There's some where you just
So
like
much energy.
yes, like there's so many different things that your soul needs and you don't even realize until you turn music on. So it's a beautiful thing because it definitely ushers you into God's presence or helps you get into it. And it doesn't have to be this formal thing that you might have experienced in church, for example. Like you can actually just connect with him in any sort of worship. So for example, I love Afro worship and I'm like, how does this even make sense? Like how does this even happen? But like I'm obsessed. I can be at the gym listening to that and having like my own like worship session on a treadmill and people have no idea, right? And it's like or in your car,
Love it.
whatever. And it's just the funniest thing. So I just love how he gives you whatever it is. Like he can meet you where you are and give something that totally lights your spirit up. Love that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So good.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be a traditional style of anything to be considered
Yeah.
worship.
Yeah.
It's
Like
about
I
the
think
intent of the content.
100%. Like I grew up like in a Catholic upbringing, right? So we were in choir and all the things. And it's like I didn't
Mhm,
feel the same level of worship there now that it
mhm,
can just be like free and whatever I feel led to. Do you know what I mean? Versus
mhm.
like you have to recite this and this is your etiquette when you're singing this song versus like, nah, man,
Absolutely.
turn it on and go wild, right? Like that actually feels way more appealing to me. So it's you have like free reign with him. He will just guide you into whatever you need to express. And that's the neat thing. It's like to your point about being a masterpiece, it's like, it's really getting out of the way and let him flow through you. And
Mhm.
worship does that. It's like this constant practice of like, okay, before I build all the things into my day, I'm going to get out of the way and just let him fill me and let that guide my day. So I love that you
Mhm.
have that in place of a to-do list, because it like breaks that doing habit.
Mhm. And
Right.
it's not something that I do consciously. Like the start of it is just
Yes.
like that's God. That's not me. It's coming into my brain and I'm like, "Oh, yes. Thank you, Lord, for another day and a good song."
Right. And I love the like playful childlike part of this. It was love like Veggie Tales, right? I'm like, what?
Yeah.
Like you can't have a bad day when
I
you're
can still
listening
sing
to
all
Veggie.
those songs.
Right. Like you can't have a bad day when you're listening to Veggie Tales. I don't see how that happens. Like,
Nope.
oh my God, so good. Trying to think what else. So I wanted to like recap some of those things. So you talked about how surrender has changed for you. You're listening to God. You're starting to be more aware of if it's good or God. So really turning things over to Him and letting Him lead and guide you. Worship is totally changed. What else? Oh, I think another thing that's happening is like what He's connecting for you with your future. Do you want to talk about that a little bit? Like how He's like suddenly bringing things together about where you're headed? Because I think that's beautiful. It's that Habakkuk promise, right? That He writes that vision with you. Like He starts making it plain. Whereas on your own, without tracking with Him, it might look like, well, I experienced that and I don't get how that made sense. Or I did this thing over here, but it all felt like unrelated, and then you run into him and he's like, actually, here's how it all comes together and forms this beautiful thing.
Yeah, so I think I am I mean, I've been working on this for a little while, but mostly from my own good and not from God.
I love.
Um, but working on starting my own coaching business that has
Yeah.
a nature aspect to it as well. Um, so having working with women that want to feel more connected to God, but also connect with nature and just have that quiet, peaceful time, and be closer to Jesus and know that they can come any way that they are in that
Love
moment.
that.
So outdoor adventure, life coaching, meeting them where they're at. It's all being birthed.
Love
Stay tuned.
Yes. So fun. So, so fun. And then the other thing that I would love for you to share is if anybody is thinking about joining the mastermind and is kind of in that place where you're like, I don't even know how I got here. I'm not fully sure what this even is. It's just like, I have this thing in my spirit that I know that this is next for me. So if somebody is there, what would you say to that person?
Take the leap of faith like I did and just do it.
You won't regret it.
No, you won't regret it. The content is great. There's so many learning opportunities, growth opportunities. Working with Juliana is fun, and the group space that she creates is amazing. So just do it.
I love. And then two questions here as we're like wrapping up. One is, what do you wish you could have told, like that you know now? Like, what would you go back and tell your younger self?
That's a
If you could give
hard
her like,
question.
yeah, if you could give her a piece of advice, what would you tell her?
Hmm.
This is a great question for anybody listening to do as well. Like, if you could go back and tell
Yeah.
your younger self a little nugget of wisdom, a pearl of wisdom, something that would radically change her life when she needed to hear it most, what would you tell her?
Probably that no matter what you do, you're worthy of love.
Hmm, that's such a good one. Such
Yeah,
a,
I think that throughout my life is probably something that I needed to hear a lot.
yeah, just being like affirmed and validated.
Mm-hmm.
In that.
Mm-hmm.
So good. And
Because
I,
even when you hear it from the outside, you don't necessarily believe it on the inside. And I needed that inside person to be like, yeah, you're loved, you're worthy. And
I
that love is a deeper love than you can even understand because you don't really understand love.
totally. That's it.
Yeah.
And I sense
Hmm.
too, because we always carry this younger self version. So I sense too, as you're like birthing these new fun things with God, that that's constantly what will be your best gift is giving that to yourself, validating yourself, affirming yourself, and continuing to do
Hmm.
that as you build. It's just a very different way to build. Like we're always taught to like push into force and to like make it happen and like, right? But it's like when you just like validate and encourage and celebrate like every single step, like it turns into something like beyond what you know you're capable of creating. So for what
Mhm.
that's worth,
It's
I sense
playful and fun.
yes. Yes. So that's what I sense is probably going to be how that even plays out in your future. But I love that. And then what are you most looking forward to in this season that God has you in right now?
Oh, I am most looking forward to what this program that I have inside of me becomes and the next steps of life for my relationship with God and what that means, listening better. Yeah, just having more of that connection and what comes from that. Um, yeah,
Oh my
I
God.
don't know. Actually stepping into action.
Yeah. Let's go. Well, that'll be definitely happening. Just wait. But what I love
Yeah.
too, and what I just want to honor and validate in you is there is so much contentment that I feel like has not been there before. Like this is definitely like new to be at like this depth of contentment. I just want to like reflect that
Mhm.
back to you. I also want to honor that there is so much joy and freedom and grace in how you are showing up right now, right? It's just you're very present, you're very intentional, you're just not trying to get to this next place. Like you're fully where you are and you're in this place of trusting that everything that's happening now is automatically leading you there. And it is beautiful and it's so fun to witness. I can just feel that change in you already. And I just want to hold that up for you.
Thank you. Yeah, it's definitely not the way I've done other things in the past, so it
No,
does feel different.
so good. Well done.
Thank you.
So good. Well, it has
I
been
have to fight the bad things away sometimes that say I'm not doing enough or doing anything, but yes, I am content and looking forward to everything unrolling the way that it's supposed to.
and you're doing all of the God things with God. So
Mhm. Yes, most important.
so good. Well, it has been such a gift to have you here. Thank you so much for sharing your story, sharing your journey, sharing testimonies that you've walked through, and just being here today. It's just been so fun.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
You're
I
welcome.
fully enjoyed it.
Yay.